Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for an intense medical deep dive into one of the most severe, rapidly moving infections known to modern medicine. It's a condition that literally commands immediate respect in any emergency room anywhere in the world. It's called Fournier's gangrene. We're going to break down exactly what this is, how it completely hijacks the human body, and the incredible rapid-fire surgical countermeasures that are absolutely required to stop it in its tracks. All right, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right away and confront a pretty staggering statistic. This condition carries a mortality rate of up to 67% if it isn't treated promptly. 67%. That number is just incredibly high for a localized infection, especially in our modern antibiotic era. It tells us right out of the gate that we aren't just dealing with your standard run-of-the-mill bacterial infection. No. We're dealing with a systemic crisis that outpaces the body's natural defenses in just a matter of hours. So you really got to wonder, right? How does a minor scratch, we're talking something as simple as a bruise or a tiny abrasion, how does that become a life-threatening surgical emergency so quickly? The sheer terrifying speed and the incredibly high stakes of our subject today all basically come down to this perfect storm of anatomy, underlying health, and microscopic warfare.
Section 1. A rapidly evolving threat.
Okay, let's look at the actual textbook clinical definition because every single word here carries massive weight. Fournier's gangrene is a fulminant, polymicrobial necrotizing fasciitis of the perineum and genitalia. Sounds intense, right? Well, let's break it down. Fulminant means it explodes suddenly and escalates with extreme violence. Polymicrobial means we're not just dealing with one rogue bacterium, it's an entire gang of different bacteria working together. And necrotizing fasciitis, that means it is literally a flesh-eating infection that rapidly spreads along the deep layers of connective tissue, just destroying everything in its path. Now, what's truly fascinating here is that this disease rarely strikes a perfectly healthy host out of nowhere. While the inciting incident can literally be a simple scratch, an insect bite, or a minor medical procedure, it usually requires a vulnerable environment to really take hold. Individuals with compromised immune systems, and we're talking particularly about those with diabetes mellitus, chronic alcoholism, or severe malnutrition, they're at the absolute highest risk. You see, their microvascular systems are often already impaired. That means their bodies just can't rush white blood cells to the site of a minor injury fast enough to stop the invasion. Section 2. The Synergistic Bacterial Invasion. This brilliantly illustrates the lethal teamwork at play. It's like a devastating tag team match. You have two classes of bacteria teaming up. The aerobic bacteria, the ones that actually need oxygen to survive, they attack first. They destroy the living tissue, and in doing so, they consume all the local oxygen. This creates a hypoxic or oxygen-depleted dead zone. And that paves the perfect environment for the anaerobic bacteria, the ones that actually thrive in the absence of oxygen, to wake up and run absolutely wild, driving rapid, deep tissue necrosis. So who's actually in this invading force? We're looking at a rogues gallery of microscopic culprits, a deadly mix of streptococci, staphylococci, E. coli, and bacteroides. On their own, your body fights these guys off regularly, but together, their synergistic action is what makes the infection so overwhelming. The enzymes and toxins produced by one species actively protect and accelerate the growth of the others. It's a highly coordinated attack. But how exactly do they kill the tissue? Well, it's through a process called obliterative arteritis. The overwhelming inflammation and bacterial toxins cause the tiny blood vessels, the arterioles, to literally clot off and thrombose. They completely obliterate the blood supply. Once that blood stops flowing, the tissue starves, dies, and turns gangrenous. And here is the kicker. Because there's no blood flow, systemic IV antibiotics can't even reach the infection site. The bacteria have essentially built a fortress of dead tissue around themselves. Section 3. Symptoms and progression. This brings us to a really terrifying paradox in the clinical presentation, which we can call the rule of contrast. In the early stages, the patient feels agonizing, excruciating pain, yet the skin might just look slightly red or even completely normal. The pain is entirely out of proportion to the physical findings because the infection is raging deep in those fascial planes, completely out of sight. But later on, the pain actually subsides. The patient might even think they're getting better, but the reality is much, much darker. They feel nothing because the local nerve tissues have actually died. The timeline here? It is a literal ticking clock. For maybe 2 to 7 days, a patient might just feel vaguely unwell.
a slight fever, some lethargy. But then the escalation happens in hours. You go from intense pain and swelling to a dusky grayish skin color. Then comes subcutaneous crepitation, which is this terrifying crackling feeling under the skin caused by gas released by the bacteria. Just hours after that, obvious black gangrene sets in, and the patient's entire body crashes into massive septic shock.
The physical toll is just devastating because the infection rapidly tracks along very specific anatomical planes. It acts like a wildfire following a dry riverbed, spreading right along the Dartos, Scarpas, and Colles fascia. Those are the connective tissues of the lower abdomen and perineum. The gas production by the Clostridial and coliform bacteria causes that crepitation we just talked about. And at this stage, bacterial toxins are just flooding the bloodstream, causing septic shock and often pushing the patient right into acute renal failure. Section 4. The surgical counterattack. The absolute second Fournier's gangrene is suspected, it's all hands on deck in the ER. Protocol must be initiated instantly. Step 1 is massive intravenous fluid resuscitation and a heavy cocktail of broad-spectrum antibiotics to fight the systemic shock. Step 2 is radical surgical debridement, and we'll talk about what radical means in a second. Step 3 often involves diverting urine or feces away from the area to prevent any further contamination of the open wounds. And Step 4, assuming the patient survives the initial onslaught, is extensive reconstruction. Now, I mentioned radical debridement. Here is the absolute surgical mandate: immediate and repeated wide excision of dead tissue. Because of that obliterative arteritis we discussed earlier, those clotted blood vessels, antibiotics simply can't reach the bacteria. They just can't. The only way to save the patient's life is for surgeons to physically cut away the advancing front of the disease. They literally have to remove all necrotic tissue until they reach healthy, actively bleeding tissue. And they often have to return to the operating room every 24 hours to do it all over again until the spread finally stops. Okay, but here is a truly fascinating anatomical quirk. Despite all this horrific destruction of the overlying skin and tissues in the perineum and scrotum, the testes themselves are almost always spared from the gangrene. No way, right? But it's true. Why? Because their blood supply doesn't come from the local tissue. It comes directly down from the abdomen via the testicular artery. So the infection destroys the local blood supply, but that deep abdominal supply line remains intact, keeping the organs alive right in the middle of all this destruction. For the folks who actually survive this incredible ordeal, the road to recovery is, well, it's grueling. They require intensive nutritional support because their bodies are burning massive calories trying to heal. Surgeons use vacuum-assisted closure therapy to promote tissue granulation. And, amazingly, because the scrotal skin is often entirely removed, surgeons will sometimes temporarily implant the surviving testes into surgically created pouches in the patient's medial thighs to protect them while the primary site heals. Later on, extensive skin grafting is done to rebuild the anatomy. It's a brutal, honestly awe-inspiring battle between a synergistic bacterial army and the absolute limits of surgical endurance, which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. How does understanding this microscopic world of cooperating bacteria completely change how we treat systemic emergencies? By knowing exactly how these pathogens suffocate tissue and block antibiotics, we know that sometimes the only path to healing is the surgeon's scalpel. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible mechanics of the human body.